The automatic doors of St. Mary's emergency room burst open with a violent whoosh, and Jessica Lopez barely glanced up from her computer screen as a disheveled figure stumbled through the entrance. The man's clothes hung in tatters, his beard matted and unkempt, his bare feet leaving wet prints across the sterile linoleum floor. The pungent smell of the streets followed him like a shadow. Next, Jessica called out mechanically, her voice cutting through the chaos of the air like a blade. But what happened next shocked everyone in that room, because this homeless man was about to reveal a connection that would shatter everything Jessica thought she knew about her own past. The man shuffled toward her station, his movements unsteady, his eyes struggling to focus. Jessica's jaw tightened as she watched him approach. Another homeless patient looking for a warm bed and a free meal. She'd seen hundreds just like him over the past 5 years, and frankly, she was exhausted. "Sir, you need to check in with security first," she said without looking up, her fingers continuing to type patient notes. "They'll need to verify your insurance information." The man swayed slightly, gripping the edge of her desk for support. "Please," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the beeping monitors and bustling medical staff. I need help." Jessica finally looked up, her brown eyes cold and professional. "Everyone needs help, sir. That's why this is a hospital. But we have procedures." She gestured toward the security desk with an impatient wave. "Please follow protocol." Little did Jessica know that 15 years earlier, she had sat in a lecture hall at Johns Hopkins Medical School, her eyes bright with ambition and hope. The professor standing at the front of that classroom had captivated her with his passionate speeches about medical ethics and patient care. "Remember this above all else, Doctor," Richard Murphy had said, his distinguished silver hair catching the afternoon light streaming through the tall windows. "Every patient who walks through our doors carries with them a story, a life worth saving. We must never forget that behind every case file is a human being deserving of our compassion." Young Jessica had scribbled those words frantically in her notebook, her heart racing with the possibility of making a difference in the world. Dr. Murphy had been her mentor, her inspiration, the reason she'd chosen nursing over her original pre-med track when financial pressures mounted. But that idealistic young woman felt like a stranger now. The Jessica Lopez of today had been hardened by years of understaffing, impossible patient loads, and the constant pressure of a healthcare system that seemed to care more about profit margins than people. Her student loans still haunted her bank account every month, and the hospital administration had made it crystal clear that efficiency trumped everything else. The homeless man before her coughed violently, a wet, rattling sound that should have triggered her medical instincts. Instead, Jessica reached for the security button beneath her desk. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step back," she said firmly. "You're disrupting other patients who have been waiting." This decision would change everything, though Jessica couldn't possibly know it yet. The man steadied himself against her desk, his weathered hands trembling with weakness. His eyes, despite being clouded with exhaustion and pain, seemed to study her face with a strange intensity. "The protocol," he murmured, almost to himself. "Always the protocol first, then the patient." Something in his tone made Jessica pause, her finger hovering over the security alert button. There was something familiar about the way he emphasized those words, like an echo from a distant memory she couldn't quite place. Behind her, Dr. Ethan Harris approached the nurse's station, his surgical scrubs still damp with perspiration from a difficult emergency procedure. He'd been watching the interaction unfold, and something about it troubled him deeply. "Jessica," Ethan said quietly, "maybe we should at least do a quick assessment. The guy looks like he's about to collapse." Jessica's shoulder tensed. "Dr. Harris, with all due respect, we have protocols for a reason. If I bend the rules for every homeless person who walks through those doors, we'll be overrun by morning." The homeless man's head lifted slightly at the mention of protocols and rules. His lips moved silently, as if he were trying to remember something important, something that remained just beyond his grasp. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the emergency room. Paramedics rushed past with a new trauma patient, their voices urgent and focused. The controlled chaos of saving lives continued around them, but for Jessica, time seemed to slow as she stared at this broken man before her. His clothes might have been expensive once, she realized with a start. Beneath the grime and wear, she could make out the remnants of what looked like a quality dress shirt. His hands, though dirty, showed evidence of careful grooming from years past. "Please," the man said again, his voice growing weaker. I taught at Johns Hopkins. Medical ethics. Patient care above protocol." Jessica's blood ran cold. The words hit her like a physical blow, sending her mind racing back to those lecture halls, those passionate speeches about compassion and dignity. Her pen slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor. But before she could process what she was hearing, before she could make sense of the impossible connection forming in her mind, she turned away from the man with deliberate coldness. "Security to the front desk, please," she announced over the intercom, her voice steady despite the earthquake of recognition beginning to shake her very foundation. The homeless man sagged against the desk, his strength finally failing him. As Jessica busied herself with unnecessary paperwork, avoiding his gaze, he lifted his head one final time and spoke her name with heartbreaking clarity. "Jessica Lopez," he whispered. "You were my brightest student." Jessica's heart pounds as she turns back toward the homeless man, his weak voice echoing in her ears. "How does he know my name?" she whispers to herself, frozen in the middle of the bustling emergency room corridor. The man's eyes are closed now, his breathing shallow. But something about his weathered face tugs at her memory like a half-forgotten dream. "Jessica, doctor." Ethan Harris's sharp voice cuts through her thoughts. She spins around to find her colleague striding toward her, his expression stern and disapproving. "What the hell was that back there?" "What do you mean?" Jessica forces herself to sound casual, but her voice wavers slightly. "You know exactly what I mean." Ethan crosses his arms, his scrubs still pristine despite the chaos around them. "That man needed immediate attention, and you brushed him off like he was nothing. Since when do we triage based on someone's appearance?" Jessica's shoulders tense. "Look, Ethan, I've got 15 other patients waiting, 3 who actually have insurance, and administration breathing down my neck about efficiency ratings. I don't have time for what? For basic human decency." Ethan's voice rises, causing nearby nurses to glance their way. "This isn't like you, Jess. What happened to the idealistic resident who used to quote medical ethics at every team meeting?" The question hits Jessica like a physical blow. She knows exactly what happened to that person, crushed under the weight of reality, buried beneath mountains of student loan debt and performance evaluations. That resident didn't have $180,000 in loans and a mortgage to worry about. She snaps back. "Some of us can't afford to play hero." But even as she says the words, something nags at her. The way the homeless man's fingers moved when he spoke her name, precise, deliberate, almost surgical. A chill runs down her spine as fragments of memory surface unbidden. Surgery is an art form. A familiar voice echoes from her past. Every movement must be intentional, every decision made with both the mind and the heart. Jessica shakes her head, trying to dispel the memory, but it clings to her consciousness like smoke. Dr. Richard Murphy had been everything she'd aspired to be: brilliant, compassionate, dedicated to healing above all else. His lectures had been legendary, filled with wisdom that went far beyond medical techniques. The moment we stop seeing patients as human beings, his voice continues in her memory, is the moment we stop being healers. "Jessica," Ethan's concerned voice brings her back to the present. "Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Maybe I have," she thinks, but doesn't say it aloud. Instead, she forces a weak smile. "I'm fine. Just tired. Double shifts, you know how it is." But Ethan isn't buying it. This isn't about being tired, and we both know it. Hospital administration has been cracking down lately, but that's no excuse for what? For being realistic. Jessica's voice turns bitter. "You think I don't know what they expect from us? Minimize costs, maximize throughput, keep the paying customers happy. That homeless guy isn't going to help my performance metrics, Ethan. One more complaint from administration, and I could lose my job." The weight of her financial pressures crashes over her again. The monthly loan payments that eat up half her salary, the constant fear of falling behind, the way her supervisor's eyes narrow every time she spends too much time with uninsured patients. The idealistic young woman who once believed medicine was about healing has been replaced by someone who calculates the cost of compassion. But as she glances back toward the homeless man, something about his sleeping face continues to haunt her. There's something familiar in the bone structure, the way his hands rest on the gurney. Her mind flashes to old medical school photographs, group shots with her favorite professors. That evening, alone in the hospital break room, Jessica finds herself scrolling through old photos on her phone. Medical school graduation, hospital rotations, awards ceremonies, all featuring a younger, more hopeful version of herself. And there, in several group shots, stands Dr. Richard Murphy in his prime, commanding respect with his presence and wisdom. Her thumb hovers over one particular image, Dr. Murphy demonstrating a complex surgical technique, his hands positioned exactly like the homeless man's had been when he whispered her name. The resemblance is subtle but unmistakable, hidden beneath layers of weathering and hardship. Jessica's phone slips from her trembling fingers as the impossible truth begins to dawn on her. Jessica's hands trembled as she stared at the faded photograph in her locker. The confident surgeon in the white coat looked nothing like the broken man lying on the gurney. Yet something in his eyes was unmistakable. She snapped the locker shut and turned to find Ethan watching her from across the break room. "Jessica, we need to talk." His voice carried a weight she'd rarely heard before. "What happened out there with that patient wasn't like you." She forced a laugh, but it came out hollow. "Since when do you care about my bedside manner?" "Since I watched you treat a human being like garbage." Ethan stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Look, I know things have been rough since the divorce, and I know those student loans are crushing you, but that man needed help." Jessica's defenses crumbled for just a moment. The weight of her $70,000 debt, her ex-husband's betrayal, and years of working double shifts to stay afloat crashed over her. But she couldn't afford weakness, not with the hospital administration breathing down everyone's necks about efficiency ratings. "I need you to do something for me," she said suddenly. "And I need you to not ask questions." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "That's usually how people get in trouble around here." "I need you to help me verify that man's identity." Quietly, her voice was barely audible. "I think he might be someone from my past." What Jessica didn't tell Ethan was how Dr. Murphy's voice echoed in her mind from those medical school lectures years ago. She could still hear him saying, "Medicine isn't about protocols and paperwork. It's about seeing the human being in front of you, no matter what they look like or where they come from." 2 hours later, Jessica made a decision that would change everything. While the homeless man waited in the overcrowded ER, she quietly arranged for him to receive a full medical evaluation. Bypassing the standard triage protocols, she used her own access codes and called in favors with lab technicians. "Jessica, what are you doing?" Ethan found her reviewing unauthorized test results at a computer terminal. "What Dr. Murphy taught me to do," she whispered. "Remember him? From the residency program 5 years ago?" Ethan's face went pale. "The surgeon who disappeared. The one who trained half the staff here." Before Jessica could respond, Administrator Patricia Chen appeared behind them like a storm cloud. "Nurse Lopez, Dr. Harris, my office, now." The sterile conference room felt like a courtroom, as Patricia Chen spread Jessica's unauthorized medical orders across the table. Board members flanked her, their faces granite hard with disapproval. "You deliberately circumvented hospital protocol." Patricia's voice cut through the silence. "You ordered tests without authorization, used resources without approval, and created a liability nightmare." Jessica's heart pounded, but she stood her ground. That man needed medical attention. Isn't that why we became healthcare professionals? We became healthcare professionals to follow procedures that protect this institution. Board member Dr. Williams interjected, "Your romanticism about medicine is exactly the kind of thinking that leads to malpractice lawsuits." Ethan shifted uncomfortably beside her. With respect, that patient showed signs of serious medical distress. Sometimes clinical judgment has to override. "Dr. Harris, I'd suggest you choose your next words very carefully," Patricia warned. "Your colleague's reckless behavior has already put this entire department under scrutiny." Jessica felt the walls closing in. Her job, her only source of income, her entire future hung in the balance. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was being punished for the very compassion Dr. Murphy had once praised in her. "The board has reached a preliminary decision," Dr. Williams announced, his words falling like hammer blows. "Nurse Lopez, you are hereby suspended pending a full investigation into your conduct." The room spun round Jessica. Suspension meant no pay, which meant she couldn't make her loan payments, couldn't afford her apartment, couldn't survive. Everything she'd worked for since medical school was crumbling because she'd tried to help someone who reminded her of better days. But as security escorted her from the building, one question burned in her mind above all others: if that homeless man really was Dr. Richard Murphy, what had happened to turn the most dedicated physician she'd ever known into someone the system had completely forgotten? The hospital board members file out of the conference room, their faces grim as they disappear into the elevator. Jessica stands frozen in the hallway, Effen's hand on her shoulder as the weight of potential suspension crushes down on her. But as the clock strikes midnight, something shifts inside her. "I can't just let him lay there," Jessica whispers, her voice barely audible. "Not if there's even a chance it's really him." Ethan glances around the empty corridor. "Jessica, if the board finds out you're still treating him after their warning, then they find out." She straightens her shoulders, the same determination that got her through medical school flickering back to life. "Dr. Murphy always said that sometimes doing what's right means risking everything you have." They move quietly through the dimmed hospital corridors, their footsteps echoing against polished floors. The homeless man lies on a gurney in the far corner of the ER, having been moved there when the board demanded he be discharged. But Jessica had convinced the night security guard to let him rest until morning. As they approach, Ethan suddenly stops. "Wait," he breathes, studying the man's profile in the soft light. "Those hands. Look at his hands, Jessica. Even weathered and dirty, the man's fingers are long and elegant. The hands of someone who once performed delicate, life-saving procedures." Effen's eyes widen with recognition. "I remember those hands," Ethan says quietly. "Dr. Murphy operated on my appendix when I was 12. Before I even knew I wanted to be a doctor, he visited me every day during recovery, told me stories about medicine that made me fall in love with healing." Jessica's breath catches. The pieces are falling into place, but she needs to be certain. She gently takes the man's wrist to check his pulse, and his eyes flutter open. For a moment, they're cloudy and unfocused, but then they sharpen, looking directly at her. "Jessica," he says, his voice hoarse but unmistakably familiar. "You grew up to be everything I knew you would be." The words hit her like a physical blow. She stumbles backward, tears streaming down her face as years of memories come flooding back. This broken, forgotten man is truly Dr. Richard Murphy, the professor who believed in her when no one else did. "Dr. Murphy, what happened to you?" she whispers, kneeling beside the gurney. "How did you end up?" He closes his eyes, and when he speaks, his voice carries the weight of untold suffering. "Lost everything, Jessica. My wife Sarah died in a car accident 3 years ago. Couldn't save her, couldn't even get there in time. The guilt ate away at everything I was." Ethan moves closer, his own eyes filling with tears. "Dr. Murphy," continues, each word seeming to cost him enormous effort. "Started drinking to numb the pain. Lost my license, my practice, my home. Sarah was my anchor, and when she was gone..." He trails off, staring at the ceiling. "Ended up on the streets, convinced I deserved it, that I had failed as a doctor, as a husband, as a human being." Jessica grabs his hand, holding it tightly. "But you saved so many people. You taught us to save people. You didn't fail, Dr. Murphy. You're the reason I became a nurse." A small smile crosses his weathered face. "And look how magnificent you turned out. Even when you thought I was just another homeless man, you fought for me." That's the Jessica I remember from my classroom. Suddenly, the overhead lights flick on, flooding the area with harsh fluorescent brightness. Jessica spins around to see Dr. Patricia Hendricks, the hospital administrator, striding toward them with 2 security guards flanking her sides. "Nurse Lopez, Dr. Hendricks says," her voice ice cold. "I specifically told you this man was to be discharged immediately. Yet here you are, directly defying board orders." Jessica stands up slowly, her hands still holding Dr. Murphy's. "Dr. Hendricks, if you would just listen." "No, you listen." The administrator cuts her off. "You've compromised this hospital's policies, wasted valuable resources, and now you're treating patients without authorization. Security will escort you out immediately." But before the guards can move forward, Dr. Murphy struggles to sit up on the gurney. His voice, though weak, carries an authority that stops everyone in their tracks. "My name," he says clearly, looking directly at Dr. Hendricks, "is Dr. Richard James Murphy." The silence stretches between them as Dr. Richard Murphy sits up slowly in the hospital bed, his weathered hands trembling slightly. Jessica's breath catches in her throat as she truly looks at him for the first time in years, seeing past the matted gray hair, the worn clothes, the tired eyes that once commanded respect in operating rooms across the city. "Dr. Murphy," she whispers, her voice breaking. I can't believe it's really you." Richard's eyes fill with tears as he reaches out tentatively. "Jessica, my brilliant student. Look how far you've come." His voice is hoarse, but unmistakably the same warm tone that guided her through her most challenging cases during residency. "But how? What happened to you?" Jessica pulls a chair close to his bedside, her professional composure crumbling entirely. Richard closes his eyes, gathering strength. "Life has a way of humbling us all, doesn't it? After you graduated, I had my practice, my reputation, everything I thought mattered. Then Sarah, my wife, was diagnosed with early-onset dementia. I became her full-time caregiver, watching the woman I loved disappear piece by piece." Jessica's heart aches as memories flood back of Dr. Murphy talking proudly about his wife Sarah, how she'd pack him elaborate lunches and leave encouraging notes in his coat pockets. "I took a leave of absence that turned permanent," Richard continues. "Burned through our savings on treatments that didn't work, experimental therapies, anything that might bring her back. When she died 3 years ago, I had nothing left. Lost the house, my medical license lapsed, and I just couldn't find my way back." The weight of his pain settles over Jessica like a blanket. She remembers Dr. Murphy's teachings about treating every patient with dignity, regardless of their circumstances. The irony cuts deep. She'd failed to recognize her own mentor when he needed her most. "Dr. Murphy, I'm so sorry. The way I treated you earlier. There's no excuse." Tears streamed down her face. "You taught me better than that. You taught me that medicine isn't just about procedures and protocols. It's about seeing the human being in front of us." Richard reaches over and takes her hand. "You were protecting yourself, Jessica. This job, this system, it wears us down. I can see it in your eyes, the same exhaustion I felt. But you remembered who you are when it mattered. That's what counts." Ethan appears in the doorway, having overheard their conversation. His own eyes are moist as he steps forward. "Dr. Murphy, I was in your advanced trauma seminar 5 years ago. You probably don't remember me, but you changed how I approach emergency medicine." Richard's face brightens. "Dr. Harris, right? You asked that brilliant question about treating shock in pediatric patients. Of course I remember you." The moment of recognition transforms the room. Jessica feels something shifting inside her, not just guilt or shame, but a renewed sense of purpose. She thinks about all the patients she'd dismissed, all the times she'd let bureaucracy override compassion. "Dr. Murphy," Jessica says, her voice growing stronger, "I want to help you get back on your feet. More than that, I want to make sure this never happens to another healthcare worker. Too many of us are one tragedy away from where you are now." Over the following days, Jessica works tirelessly to coordinate Richard's care. She helps him navigate social services, connects him with a retired physician's support group, and even finds him temporary housing through a hospital program she'd never known existed. But more importantly, she begins advocating for systemic changes. At the monthly hospital board meeting, Jessica stands before the administrators who'd threatened her job just days earlier. "We need a comprehensive support system for healthcare workers facing personal crises. We need to remember that behind every medical professional is a human being who might need help someday." She tells Richard's story, with his permission, and proposes the Murphy Initiative. a program providing emergency assistance, mental health support, and career transition help for medical professionals in crisis. The room falls silent as Jessica concludes, "Dr. Murphy taught me that medicine is about more than treating symptoms. It's about treating the whole person. As an institution, we need to practice what we preach." 6 months later, Jessica watches as Richard, clean-shaven and wearing scrubs again, volunteers in the hospital's free clinic. His medical license has been reinstated, and while he's not ready for full-time practice, he's found purpose in mentoring young nurses and residents. "You know what I'm most proud of?" Richard tells her as they watch a new group of medical students practice their bedside manner. "It's not the surgeries I performed or the papers I published. It's watching students like you grow into the kind of doctors who remember that healing starts with seeing people as they truly are." Jessica smiles, feeling lighter than she has in years. The Murphy Initiative has helped 12 healthcare workers already, and she's been promoted to head the hospital's new patient advocacy program. But the real victory isn't professional, it's personal. "Thank you, Dr. Murphy," she says, "for teaching me that it's never too late to remember who we're supposed to be." As they stand together in the bustling hospital corridor, Jessica realizes that sometimes our greatest teachers appear when we least expect them, in the most unlikely forms. The lesson isn't just about treating homeless patients with dignity. It's about recognizing that we're all vulnerable, we all need compassion, and we all deserve second chances. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to remember the power of compassion. Let us know in the comments. Have you ever encountered someone who changed your perspective on life? Your story might inspire others to look closer, care deeper, and remember that every person we meet is fighting battles we know nothing about.